Johnson Smith was not supposed to be there. It was past midnight, and the restaurant, his restaurant, was supposed to be empty. But something had drawn him back. A forgotten file, a nagging feeling. He didn't know. He pushed open the kitchen door, and the motion sensor lights flickered on. That's when he saw her. An elderly woman, on her knees, her frail hands trembling as they reached into the trash bin, pulling out a half-eaten piece of bread. She stuffed it into her mouth quickly, desperately, like someone who hadn't eaten in days. Johnson froze. She didn't hear him. She was too consumed by hunger, by shame, by survival. This is her story. Before we continue, comment down below the country you're watching from.
Madame Joy had once been Mrs. Joy Okafor, a woman of respect. She lived in a beautiful 3-bedroom house in Surulere, Lagos. Her husband, Chief Okafor, was a successful businessman. They had 3 children, 2 sons and a daughter, who were all doing well. Joy herself was a senior school teacher, beloved by her students and colleagues. Life was good. Life was stable. Then one Tuesday morning, everything collapsed. Chief Okafor slumped at the breakfast table. A massive stroke. He was dead before the ambulance arrived. Joy's world shattered. The funeral was grand, as was expected of a man of his status. But the bills were crushing. And then the whispers began. "She killed him," the neighbors said. "A man doesn't just die like that," her husband's relatives muttered at the wake. "She's a witch. She used him for money rituals. Look at her, not even crying properly. Witch." The accusations spread like wildfire. At the market, at church, even at her school. Within weeks, the school board called her in. "Parents are uncomfortable," the headmaster said, unable to meet her eyes. "We think it's best if you resign." She lost her job. Her children, afraid of the stigma, began to pull away. Her eldest son stopped answering her calls. Her daughter moved to Abuja without telling her. Her youngest son told her bluntly, "Mama, people are talking. I have a family to protect." One by one, they abandoned her. The relatives seized the house, claiming Chief Okafor had debts. Joy couldn't fight them. She had no money for lawyers, no strength left to argue. At 68 years old, Mrs. Joy Okafor, once a woman of dignity, became Madame Joy, a homeless woman with nothing but a small bag and a broken heart. The world had called her a witch, and the world had taken everything. The streets of Lagos were unforgiving. Madame Joy had never imagined she would end up here, sleeping on cardboard under the Oshodi Bridge, begging for coins at traffic lights, scavenging through trash bins for food. The first night on the streets, she wept until her eyes were swollen. But by the second week, the tears had dried up. Survival became her only focus. She learned quickly. She learned which bins had the best leftovers. Restaurants threw out food at night. She learned which corners were safe to sleep in. She learned to avoid the area boys who harassed homeless women. Some days, kind strangers gave her money. Most days, they looked right through her as if she didn't exist. Her health began to fail. Her knees ached from sleeping on concrete. Her back throbbed. She developed a persistent cough that wouldn't go away. But she had no money for a hospital, no one to take her. She prayed. Every night she whispered the same prayer. "God, just let me survive one more day." Then, one afternoon, something changed. She was sweeping the pavement outside a large, elegant restaurant called the Golden Plate. It was something she did without being asked, just to feel useful, to feel human again. A man in a crisp white shirt stepped outside. He was the restaurant manager, Mr. Tunde. He watched her for a moment, then walked over. "Mama," he said gently, "how long have you been out here?" Joy looked up, startled. No one had called her Mama in years. I just sweep sometimes, sir. I don't want trouble." Mr. Tunde studied her face. He saw exhaustion, dignity, pain. "Can you clean?" he asked. "Yes, sir." "Then come inside, I'll give you work." For the first time in months, Madame Joy felt something she thought was lost forever: hope.
Madame Joy became the night janitor at the Golden Plate. Her job was simple: clean the kitchen, mop the floors, scrub the toilets, and take out the trash after the restaurant closed at 10 p.m. She worked alone, in silence, while the city slept outside. The pay was small, barely enough to rent a tiny room in a crowded tenement in Ajagunle. The room had no fan, no proper bed, just a thin mat on the floor and a single bulb that flickered when the power came on. But to Madame Joy, it was a palace. She had a roof, she had work, she had dignity again. Every night she arrived at the restaurant at 10:30 p.m. sharp. She never complained, never asked for breaks. She worked with a quiet, fierce gratitude that moved even the coldest hearts. The kitchen staff grew fond of her. They would leave her small portions of food sometimes: rice wrapped in foil, a piece of fried chicken, half a loaf of bread. "Mama, take this home," they would say with a smile. She always thanked them profusely, her eyes glistening with tears she tried to hide. But not everyone was kind. The head chef, a loud, arrogant man named Emika, despised her. He thought she was too slow, too old, too useless. Why did Tunde hire this old woman? She's practically dead already. He never gave her food. In fact, he made sure to pour salt or soap over the leftovers before throwing them away, just so she couldn't take them. Madame Joy said nothing. She had learned long ago that silence was survival. She worked, she prayed, she endured. But hunger, real, gnawing hunger, was a demon she could not always defeat. And on some nights, when there was no food left and no money in her pocket, she did what she had learned to do on the streets. She went to the trash bin. It started on a Thursday night. Madame Joy had not eaten since the previous morning. Her landlord had demanded rent that week, and she had given him everything she had. There was nothing left for food. Her stomach twisted with hunger as she mopped the restaurant floors. Her hands trembled, her vision blurred. She told herself she could wait until morning. She told herself she would be fine. But at 1 a.m., after everyone had left, the hunger became unbearable. She stood in the empty kitchen, staring at the large black trash bin in the corner. She knew Chef Emika had thrown away the leftover jollof rice and chicken. She had seen him do it. He had poured something over it, probably pepper sauce, but it didn't matter. She was starving. Her pride screamed at her. "You were a teacher. You were a wife. You were a mother. Don't do this!" But her stomach screamed louder. Slowly, shamefully, she walked to the bin. She glanced around to make sure no one was watching. Then she knelt down, her old knees pressing into the cold tile floor, and reached inside. Her fingers found a piece of chicken. It was covered in sauce and bits of trash, but she wiped it on her uniform and ate it quickly, tears streaming down her face. She hated herself. But she was alive. From that night on, it became a routine. Every night after her work was done, after the lights were dimmed and the restaurant was silent, Madame Joy would kneel by the trash bin and eat whatever she could find. She made sure no one ever saw her. She made sure no one ever knew. It was her secret, her shame. Until the night Johnson Smith walked in. Johnson Smith was exhausted. He had spent the entire day in back-to-back meetings. Investors, lawyers, board members. His empire was vast. Hotels, restaurants, real estate. The Golden Plate was just one of 20 restaurants he owned across Lagos. He rarely visited them. His managers handled everything. But tonight, something gnawed at him. A contract he thought he'd left in his office at the Golden Plate. He needed it for a morning meeting. So, at 12:45 a.m., he drove himself there.
The restaurant was dark when he arrived. He used his key to enter through the side door, moving quietly through the dimly lit hallways. He headed toward the manager's office, his footsteps echoing softly. Then he heard it, a faint rustling sound, coming from the kitchen. His instincts sharpened. A thief? A break-in? He pushed open the kitchen door. The motion sensor lights flickered on. And that's when he saw her. An elderly woman, frail, gray-haired, kneeling on the cold floor in a faded uniform. Her hands were deep inside the trash bin. She pulled out a piece of bread, moldy at the edges, and brought it to her mouth, eating quickly, desperately, like an animal that hadn't seen food in days. Johnson froze. His heart stopped. He knew her, Madame Joy, his night janitor. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then she sensed him. Her head snapped up, her eyes wide with terror and shame locked onto his. The bread fell from her trembling hands. "Sir, her voice cracked. She tried to stand, but her legs buckled beneath her. Johnson didn't say a word. He just stood there, staring at the woman on her knees, and felt something break inside him. This was his restaurant, his employee, and she was eating from his trash.
Johnson moved toward her slowly, carefully, as if approaching something fragile that might shatter. "Madam," he said softly, "please, stand up." But Madame Joy couldn't. Shame had pinned her to the floor. Her whole body shook. Tears poured down her wrinkled cheeks. "I'm sorry, sir. I'm so sorry. Please, don't sack me. I beg you. I have nowhere to go. Stop!" His voice was firm, but gentle. He knelt down beside her, right there on the kitchen floor. A billionaire in a tailored suit, kneeling next to a janitor covered in trash and tears. He reached out and took her trembling hands in his. "When did you last eat?" he asked quietly. She couldn't answer. She just wept. Johnson's jaw tightened. His eyes burned with anger, not at her, but at himself. At the world, at the system that let this happen. He stood and pulled out his phone. "Hello? Yes, this is Johnson Smith. I need food delivered to the Golden Plate, immediately. Rice, chicken, plantain, soup, everything. Hot, now. I don't care what time it is. 20 minutes. He hung up and turned back to her. "Madame Joy, you will never eat from a trash bin again. Do you hear me? Never." She stared at him, disbelieving. Within 20 minutes, the food arrived. Johnson spread it out on the kitchen counter. Steaming jollof rice, fried chicken, moi moi, fresh juice. "Eat," he said. She hesitated, overwhelmed. "Please, Mama, eat." That word, Mama, broke her. She sat down and ate. And for the first time in years, someone watched her, not with disgust, but with respect. When she was done, Johnson made a decision. "You're coming home with me," he said. "Sir?" "From now on," he said firmly, "you don't work here anymore. You live with me. I will take care of you." She shook her head, confused, terrified. "Why?" she whispered. Johnson looked at her with eyes full of something she hadn't seen in years. Compassion. "Because you remind me of my own mother, and no mother should ever suffer like this."
Johnson's mansion in Ikoyi was like something out of a dream. Madame Joy sat in the passenger seat of his sleek black Mercedes, her hands folded tightly in her lap, her heart pounding. She didn't belong here. She knew it. He would realize his mistake soon and send her back. But when they arrived, he didn't hesitate. He led her through the grand entrance, past marble floors and crystal chandeliers, into a spacious guest room on the ground floor. The room had a large bed with soft white sheets, a wardrobe, a private bathroom, and a window overlooking a beautiful garden. Madame Joy stood at the doorway frozen. This is for me?" she whispered. "Yes," Johnson said simply. "This is your room now." Tears filled her eyes again. "Sir, I cannot. I am just a cleaner. You are not a cleaner anymore. You are family." He called his housekeeper, Mrs. Ada, a kind middle-aged woman who managed the household. "Mrs. Ada, this is Madame Joy. She will be living here from now on. Treat her with respect. She is like a mother to me." Mrs. Ada's eyes widened in surprise, but she nodded politely. "Yes, sir." Johnson turned back to Madame Joy. "Mama, you've suffered enough. Let me carry this burden now." That night, for the first time in years, Madame Joy slept on a real bed. She slept without fear. She slept without hunger. And she wept tears of gratitude into the pillow, whispering prayers of thanks to a God she thought had forgotten her.
News travels fast in a billionaire's household. By morning, every staff member knew that their boss had brought home an old woman, a former janitor, and was calling her mother. The whispers started immediately. "Who is she?" the cook asked. "I heard she's a witch," one of the housemaids said, eyes wide. "Maybe she bewitched him. That's why he's acting strange. She was eating from the trash. What kind of person does that? Something is wrong with her." Mrs. Ada tried to silence them. Mr. Johnson said to treat her with respect. That's all you need to know. But the gossip didn't stop. Some of the staff began to avoid Madame Joy. They greeted her coldly. They watched her with suspicion. When she walked into a room, conversations stopped. One morning, as she sat quietly in the kitchen, two housemaids stood nearby, speaking just loud enough for her to hear. "She's probably cursed. Why else would a billionaire bring home a trash-eating old woman? Maybe she's her real mother, and he's ashamed to admit it. Or maybe she did juju on him." Madame Joy's hands trembled as she held her cup of tea. The words cut deeper than any hunger ever had. She wanted to run, to leave, to disappear back into the streets where at least no one pretended to care. But before she could move, a voice boomed from the doorway. "Enough." It was Johnson. His face was hard, his eyes blazing with controlled fury. The entire kitchen fell silent. He walked slowly toward the two maids, his presence filling the room. "If I ever hear anyone in this house disrespect Madame Joy again, you will not just lose your job. I will make sure you never work in Lagos again." The maids' faces went pale. Johnson turned to the entire staff. "She is under my protection. She is family. And in this house, family is sacred." He looked at Madame Joy, his expression softening. "No one will hurt you here, Mama. I promise."
That evening, Johnson invited Madame Joy to sit with him in the living room. She hesitated, still uncomfortable in such luxury, but he gestured warmly to the chair beside him. "Mama," he began quietly, "I want to know your story, not because I doubt you, but because I want to understand." Madame Joy looked down at her hands, hands that had scrubbed floors, dug through trash, and lost everything. And for the first time in years, she spoke. She told him everything. About her late husband, the stroke, the funeral, the accusations of witchcraft that destroyed her life. "They said I killed him," she whispered, her voice breaking. "My own children believed them. They stopped calling, stopped visiting. I lost my job, my home, everything." Johnson listened in silence, his fists clenched. She told him about the streets, the hunger, the nights under the bridge, the shame of eating from trash bins just to survive. "I wanted to die," she admitted, "but I kept waking up. I kept breathing. I didn't know why." When she finished, the room was heavy with silence. Johnson leaned forward, his eyes filled with pain and purpose. "Mama," he said slowly, "my own mother died when I was 12. She was a cleaner, just like you. She worked 3 jobs to feed me and my sister. One night, she collapsed from exhaustion. No one helped her. No one cared." His voice cracked. "I built this empire because I promised myself I would never let another mother suffer the way she did." He reached out and took Madame Joy's hands. "You are not a witch. You are not cursed. You are a survivor. And from this day forward, you will never be abandoned again." Tears streamed down her face. "Why me?" she whispered. Johnson smiled gently. "Because God sent me to that kitchen at exactly the right time, and I believe you were sent to remind me why I do what I do." He paused. "You saved me too, Mama."
3 months later, Madame Joy was unrecognizable. Her health had been restored. A team of doctors had treated her cough, her aching joints, her malnutrition. She had gained weight. Her eyes sparkled again. Johnson didn't just give her a room, he gave her purpose. He enrolled her in a literacy program for the elderly. He took her to church every Sunday. He introduced her to his friends as the woman who changed my life. And slowly, Madame Joy began to believe she was worth something again. One afternoon, Johnson called a meeting at the Golden Plate restaurant. All the staff gathered, including Chef Emeka, who had been cruel to her. Johnson stood at the front, Madame Joy beside him. "This woman," Johnson began, his voice strong, "taught me something I had forgotten, that wealth means nothing if we forget our humanity." He turned to her. "Because of Madame Joy, I'm launching a new initiative. Every restaurant I own will now provide free meals to the homeless every Sunday, and we will hire those who want to work with dignity, fair pay, and respect." The room erupted in applause. Chef Emeka looked down in shame. Johnson wasn't finished. "And Madame Joy will oversee this program. She will be the director of community outreach for all my businesses." Madame Joy gasped, tears streaming down her face. The staff, once cold and suspicious, now clapped and cheered. That evening, as they sat together on the balcony watching the sunset, Madame Joy turned to Johnson. "You called me mother, but you gave me back my life." Johnson smiled. "No, Mama. You reminded me what life is really about." She squeezed his hand. And in that moment, 2 broken souls, one who had lost everything and one who had everything but felt empty, found something precious. Family. Not by blood, but by love. If this story touched your heart, please like, share, and subscribe. And remember, kindness costs nothing, but it can save a life.